Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions, the mystery of Samarkand, the lost crossroads of the ancient world. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. For 2,500 years, every major empire on Earth fought to control one city. Alexander the Great arrived in 329 BC and reportedly said it was more beautiful than anything he had imagined, then burned part of it in a drunken rage and had to apologize to its citizens. The Arabs conquered it in 712 AD and were astonished by its sophistication. Genghis Khan arrived in 1220 AD and killed most of its population. Timur, the conqueror known in the West as Tamerlane, made it the capital of an empire and filled it with the world's greatest artists, mathematicians, and astronomers. Samarkand sat at the center of the Silk Road, the network of trade routes connecting China to the Mediterranean for more than 1,000 years. Silk, spices, glass, paper, and ideas all passed through it. Its observatory produced the most accurate star catalogue in the world before the telescope existed. Then the sea routes opened, the Silk Road died, and Samarkand was forgotten, a magnificent ruin in Central Asia that most of the world had never heard of. It is one of the longest inhabited cities on Earth. Why does almost no one know its story? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. What separates a civilization from a collection of villages? Not technology alone, but organization, the capacity to coordinate thousands of people towards shared goals, to store and transmit knowledge across generations, to build institutions that outlast individuals. These are the hallmarks archaeologists look for when they define a civilization. And for most of the 20th century, the oldest examples they could identify dated to around 3,500 BC in Mesopotamia and Egypt. But that benchmark has been steadily eroding. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, discovered in the 1990s and excavated since, consists of massive stone circles with elaborately carved pillars depicting animals, abstract symbols, and human figures. It dates to at least 10,000 BC, roughly 6,000 years before Stonehenge, and older than the invention of pottery or agriculture in the conventional sequence. Someone built it. Someone organized the quarrying, transport, and precise placement of limestone pillars weighing up to 20 tons. Someone knew what they were building and why. That level of coordinated effort implies a society more complex than any model of 10,000 BC predicted. Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Every few years, a new site expands the timeline further. Ancient stone structures in Indonesia have been dated to 25,000 years ago. Complex astronomical alignments have been found at sites in Africa predating Egypt by millennia. The human story is older, richer, and more turbulent than the standard narrative allows. When we look at lost civilizations, we are not chasing fantasy. We are attempting to recover chapters of a history far longer than any currently recognized textbook will tell. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding Samarkand, the lost crossroads of the ancient world, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Samarkand, located in modern Uzbekistan in the Zarafshan River Valley, was founded around the 7th century BC and has been continuously or near continuously inhabited for approximately 700 years. It is one of the oldest inhabited cities in Central Asia. Alexander the Great captured it in 329 BC during his eastern campaigns, calling it by its Greek name Marakanda. The city then known was already centuries old. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered Genghis Khan captured Samarkand in 1220 AD after a brief siege. Contemporary accounts, including those of the Persian historian Juzjani, describe the massacre of much of the population and the destruction of the city's irrigation infrastructure. Estimates of pre-Mongol Samarkand's population range from several 100,000 to over 1 million. The Mongol destruction was one of the most catastrophic urban events in medieval history. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. Timur Tamerlane captured Samarkand in 1370 AD and made it the capital of his empire, which at its peak stretched from Anatolia to northern India. He brought artisans, scholars, and craftsmen from conquered cities including Delhi, Baghdad, and Shiraz to build and adorn Samarkand. The Registan complex, 3 madrasas surrounding a central square, was begun during his reign and completed by his successors in the 15th to 17th centuries. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Ulugh Beg, Timur's grandson, ruled Samarkand from 1409 to 1449 and built an astronomical observatory completed around 1420. Equipped with a meridian arc 40 meters in radius, effectively an enormous sextant built into the hillside, the observatory produced a star catalogue of 18 stars, the Zijai Sultani, which was the most accurate astronomical work produced anywhere in the world until Tycho Brahe in the late 16th century. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the Silk Road's decline, as Samarkand's economic lifeline began in the late 15th century when Portuguese navigator Vasco da Gama opened a sea route to India around the Cape of Good Hope in 1498. Ottoman control of Anatolia and the Persian Gulf further disrupted overland trade. By the 16th century, the maritime routes had redirected the bulk of Asia-Europe trade away from Central Asia, permanently ending Samarkand's role as the world's central commercial crossroads. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The Afrasiab site, the ruins of pre-Mongol Samarkand, north of the modern city, has yielded a remarkable 7th century AD palace fresco discovered in 1965, depicting a royal reception scene with ambassadors from China, India, Korea, and the steppe peoples, surrounded by hunting scenes. It is one of the finest surviving examples of Sogdian art and provides direct visual evidence of Samarkand's role as a meeting point of the ancient world's major civilizations. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain Samarkand, the lost crossroads of the ancient world. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the mainstream historical explanation for Samarkand's long-term decline centers on the maritime trade revolution of the late 15th century. Once Vasco da Gama's sea route and subsequent European expansion redirected Asian trade to oceanic shipping. The economic logic that had made Central Asian overland routes indispensable collapsed. No city built on overland trade could compete with a sea route that was faster, cheaper, and politically outside the control of any Central Asian power. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence. But it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the Mongol destruction of 1220 AD permanently altered Samarkand's demographic and agricultural base in ways that took centuries to recover. The destruction of the Qanat irrigation network that supported the city's population, requiring generations to rebuild, meant that the post-Mongol city never fully regained the scale or institutional depth of its pre-Mongol predecessor. Timur's rebuilding was brilliant, but built on a shallower foundation. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the political fragmentation following Timur's death in 1405 and the gradual disintegration of the Timurid Empire through the 15th and 16th centuries removed the centralized patronage and security infrastructure that had sustained Samarkand's cultural and commercial peak. Rival Timurid princes competing for the city prevented the kind of sustained investment that had produced Ulugh Beg's observatory and the Registan complex. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding Samarkand the lost crossroads of the ancient world, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the Registan complex in Samarkand, comprising the Ulugh Beg Madrasa 1420, the Sherdor Madrasa 1636, and the Tilyakori Madrasa 1660, stands as physical evidence of sustained architectural patronage across 3 centuries. The tilework, muqarnas vaulting, and scale of the complex represent one of the finest surviving examples of Timurid and post-Timurid Islamic architecture and attract hundreds of thousands of visitors annually. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented Ulugh Beg's observatory was excavated between 1908 and 1948 by Russian and Soviet archaeologists led initially by V.L. Zvyatkin. The lower portion of the meridian arc, carved into the bedrock of a hillside, was found intact. The Zijai Sultani star catalogue survived in manuscript copies and has been studied by modern astronomers who have confirmed its accuracy to within approximately 1 arcminute for most stars, a remarkable achievement for 15th century instrumentation. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the Afrasiab fresco, discovered in 1965 during construction work and now housed in the Afrasiab Museum, depicts in extraordinary detail a mid-7th century royal reception in pre-Islamic Samarkand. The multinational assembly of figures documented in the fresco, identifiable by costume and iconography as Chinese, Indian, Turkish, and Iranian, provides direct pictorial evidence of Samarkand's role as the living crossroads of the Silk Road at the height of its commercial power. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding Samarkand, the lost crossroads of the ancient world. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Samarkand was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2001 under the designation Samarkand, Crossroads of Cultures. Uzbekistan has invested substantially in the restoration and presentation of the Registan Ulugh Beg's Observatory, Timur's Mausoleum, the Guri Amir, and the Bibi Khanum. Mosque tourism has grown significantly since Uzbekistan opened to international visitors more broadly after 2016. The Chinese Belt and Road Initiative's revival of overland Central Asian trade routes has given Samarkand renewed geopolitical relevance. Ulugh Beg's scientific legacy is increasingly recognized in histories of astronomy that extend beyond European traditions. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of Samarkand, the lost crossroads of the ancient world, from the historical record through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Samarkand ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.